Happy Monday, everyone. Happy Monday. I am Abercurt, a certified integrative life and wellness coach and lifestyle designer, and you are watching Sparked. Sparked is my weekly lifestyle series and a warm and welcoming online community that meets right here in the comments of the show. We light fires of connection, reflection, and inspiration about all things personal growth, wellness, and the world around us. So, if you're a dreamer, a doer, or anyone just on a journey to live your most joyful, meaningful, or fulfilling life, you are in the right place, my friend. So, say hi, let me know you're here, and start connecting. I see Scott. Hello. Happy Monday. Thank you for being here. As you all are hopping on, please say hi. Let me know you're here. And as you are hopping on tonight, give me a couple of words about how you're feeling now that we've got, a good 10 days of 2021 under our belts, right? Hi, Donna. Hi, Mama Vicky. It is so great to see you. Hello, Lisa. As you all are hopping on and saying hi and connecting, give me a couple words about how you all are feeling now that we've got, a good 10 days of 2021 under our belt. How are you feeling heading into this, like we're moving into the middle stretch of January here. Can you believe it? Already, we are heading into the middle of January already. So let me know how you guys are doing. Hello, Georgie. It is so great to see you here. Thank you for being here. Let me know how you guys are doing, right? We've had some ups and downs already in 2021. We've had some ups and downs, and I know that has been a challenging time for a lot of us. And yeah, Lisa said she's disappointed that 2021 doesn't seem better. And Lisa, it's really interesting that you said that because we talked, right, about how we don't just flip a switch on from December 31st to January 1st, and it's not a whole new world. It's not a whole new life. It's not Freaky Friday, right? Hi, Tina. It is so great to see you here. Tina says she's hanging in there. One day at a time is the way to go. That is a great philosophy, Tina. Donna says, shall we hit the reset on 2021 on January 20th? Here's my philosophy about that. It's impossible to wipe away weeks and weeks and weeks and years and years and years of whatever, of challenges, of difficulties, of bad juju, right, in one fell swoop in one day. So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but that's just not how it works, right? It takes time. Tina's a one day at a time philosophy. We just keep moving forward. We manage our own expectations, right, about how things should go, and we do our part every single day to bring as much light and love and positivity to the world as we possibly can, all right? And that is how we manage the year ahead, regardless of what days look like, right? Scott says he agrees with Tina, one day at a time. Yes, that is a great philosophy. And it is a new year, right? We already talked last week a little bit about how a lot of us are setting resolutions, we're setting new goals. And so tonight's episode is all about the boundaries that can help us follow through on them and be successful. So tonight's episode is all about boundaries. We are going to be talking about setting and enforcing them, okay? I am going to talk about why boundaries aren't just important, but they are actually necessary in our lives, okay? Necessary in our lives. I am going to reveal 8 signs that boundary setting is probably way overdue in your life. And I'm going to share some tips and tools for setting and enforcing boundaries for people who may not have ever done it before or may not know where to start. And of course, every single week here on Sparked, we have a moment of joy. We talk about an amazing charity, and we play some themed trivia. So, if that sounds like something that lights your spark, please send up some hearts and hit that share button. Hit that share button because I bet we all know some people in our social media feeds that could benefit from a refresher on boundaries. Vicky said she is still looking for the good things to start happening. I think some good things probably are happening. Let's focus on the good things in our lives, right? Let's focus on the good things that are happening, and that will help us continue to be grateful and see the good. And no, it's been a up and down patch, right? It has been a rough couple of days, but we're going to talk about setting some boundaries and how to move forward with a good mindset, right? A good mindset. Georgie says in her devotional this morning, it said, there is a time for everything. Be patient. Yes. Patience with how things unfold, Georgie, is so important. Thank you for that reminder, because it's our patience with, change, right? That we expect instant gratification, right? We expect that instant change. We want to flip that switch and just have it all be better. And frankly, that's not how it works, right? So, Georgie, a reminder about patience is more timely and valuable than ever. And so you'll see in the show description what we're going to talk about tonight, right? Setting and enforcing boundaries, why they're not only important, but necessary. 8 signs that boundaries in your life are long overdue, and some tips and tools for people who may be beginners at setting and enforcing boundaries, right? You will also see some links to support our content and community. And every single week here on Sparked, we pay that generosity forward with a 10% contribution to charities doing amazingly important work in our local communities and across the country. And I can't wait to talk about the Charity Beneficiary from tonight's episode. It is one near and dear to my heart. So it is the viewers who keep the show up and running. So if you are feeling like you would like to contribute, please do so. There are links to support our content and community in the show description. Dana, it is so great to see you here tonight. Dana says yes. One day at a time, heck, 1 hour at a time. I like that. I like that philosophy, Dana. Very important. Patience, right? Okay, so with that, I would like to thank some people who have been very generous supporters in the past week. I'd like to thank Dana. Thank you so much. Vicky, Jane, Rose, and Donna. Thank you so much for your generous support over the past week. You guys are keeping the show up and running, new content flowing. So thank you for that. And I want to say a huge thank you to our friend Tina, who actually inspired tonight's show. Tina posted a quote on the day after the horrible attack on the Capitol here in DC about boundaries. And it was a really poignant post for me because that day I had set a boundary for myself around what I was going to be letting into my mental and emotional space that day, right? I actually set a boundary with some friends about engaging in content, and I wasn't going to let that in my space. It took too much of my time the day before, and I just had to set a boundary around it, right? And, it's easy to practice in those safe spaces, right? Our friends love us and respect our boundaries and respect what we need. But I had just exercised that setting of a boundary that day. And then Tina posted a quote in our Sparked Living Facebook group about boundaries as well. And so there was just a synchronicity there. The new year told me it's time for a talk about boundaries. And so I shifted some show content around and decided to make tonight all about boundaries. So Tina, thank you. Thank you very much for that. And before we dive into tonight's episode and content and our quote of the week, which we all love here on Sparked, I want to ask you guys to take to the comments and just give me a couple of words about what setting boundaries means to you. What do boundaries mean to you, or what do they look like in your life? If you're willing to share a few words about that in the comments before we get started tonight. So for those of you who do set boundaries or have a definition of what that is for you, just share a couple of words in the comments about what boundaries mean to you or what boundaries look like in your life? I always want to get like just a ground check for where everybody is, where people are coming to the topic from, right? So share in the comments what boundaries mean to you or what boundaries look like in your life. And while you're doing that, I will share a couple of words about what boundaries mean to me and look like in my life. And for me, it's super simple, right? This is something I do as a coach. And boundaries are really, for me, about the limits around my mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being. They represent the limits of my mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being. Tina says protection mentally, if nothing else. Yeah, it's a very similar definition and understanding, Tina. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, boundaries are about protection. They're about our limits. If anybody else wants to share what boundaries mean or look like to you, please feel free to do so in the comments. And that actually brings up another point for me. So I said boundaries are something I do as a integrative life and wellness coach. Catherine says boundaries, acceptable behavior versus unacceptable behavior. That is a great definition, Catherine. Yeah, boundaries are basically our way of saying what's okay with us, what's not okay with us. It's just as simple as that, right? That's a great definition, Catherine. Boundaries are what I help people set in many ways as an integrative life and wellness coach. And last week, after our show, one of our friends and members of our community asked the question, what is it that I actually do in my work? He was curious. He's a newer member of our community, and I hadn't talked about sort of the details of what I do to really help people understand my grounding in some of this work. And so I answered his question, and I realized that it might be helpful to just take a minute and share a definition of what the heck is an integrative life and wellness coach and lifestyle designer here in this space, and particularly as it's related to boundaries, right? So what I do is work with clients in a couple of different ways, three main ways, right? One way is somebody has a problem or problems that they want help to fix, whether it's, a health issue that they're struggling with, or there's a relationship issue they're struggling with, or maybe it's a lack of self-confidence or a lack of feeling connected to themselves, or some time that they need to carve out of their day, right? But it's problem related. So somebody comes to me and says, I need help with this thing. Can you be the guide to helping me identify the root causes of it and help me solve it? So that's one way. Another way is that somebody just wants to level up, right? They come to me, they're like, I'm pretty good. There's not like a really big problem in my life, but I want to level up. I need to work on my personal presence. I need to feel more expansive. I need to build self-confidence or my personal branding for a promotion I'm going after at work or something along those lines. So I help people level up. And then a third way is helping people navigate the midst of or the aftermath of a really major life transition. So maybe it's something like a divorce or death of a loved one, or somebody starting a new business and it's a whole new ball game in their life and they don't know how to juggle all the things, right? So navigating major life transitions. So that's three ways that I work with clients as an integrative life and wellness coach, and we help design a lifestyle that solves their problems, that helps them level up and helps them navigate through their transitions and come out the other side stronger, right? So as it relates to boundaries, a lot of that work is around what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, carving out spaces for our time, right? Dana says, wonky eating times for firefight, like boundaries around times for eating, right? Donna says boundaries are the line of what she's willing to accept and not accept in terms of consistency with her values. Yes, we talk a lot about values here on Sparked, and our boundaries are always best exercised, enforced, and set when they're grounded in our values, right? Boundaries grounded in our values will never do us wrong, right? Donna, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Trish says, what makes me comfortable or not? Yeah, it's that yes and no, right? It's the this is okay, this is not okay, our boundaries. Yeah, so thank you guys for sharing those definitions and understandings. That's, you guys are, you know what we're talking about tonight. You know what we're talking about tonight. So let's dive in. I want to start with the quote that inspired tonight's episode. It's the quote of the week. It is that time, and it is the quote that Tina shared in our Sparked Living group. So if you guys aren't already members of the Sparked Living group, that is kind of the companion group to this series, it's where we share and connect and get inspired and support one another. Right after this episode is over, get on over there and join Sparked Living, because that's where some good stuff is happening and positive energy is flowing. And it is responsible for inspiring tonight's topic. So Tina already knows what I'm about to say, and maybe some of you who remember the quote do as well. But it was a great quote about boundaries, and it was even more a sign of synchronicity for me because the quote is attributed to the author of the book that I selected for my January book club pick for my Let's Get Lit virtual book club, Brené Brown. So this week's quote is from Brené Brown. And Brené says this about boundaries. She says, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. Daring, and the January book club pick is daring greatly, right? So Brené says daring to set boundaries is about having the courage. It's about courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others, right? Georgie says boundaries are about stop being guilted into continuing to do things that you really don't want to do. Yes, absolutely, right? Unhealthy boundaries make us feel guilt and resentment and all of those things. And we're going to talk about those feelings in a minute and talk about ways that boundaries are actually good for our relationships, right? Because they help ward off feelings like guilt and making us feel like we have to do something that we really don't want to do. So, quote of the week from Brené Brown. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. All right, so powerful. Tina, thank you for sharing that and inspiring tonight's episode. All right, so with that, I want to ask our first trivia question of the night. Now, I said we were going to talk about themed trivia, okay? So, we're not going to be talking about life coaching kinds of questions here, but we are going to be talking about trivia related to boundaries and borders and things like that. So, our first trivia question of the evening is about the boundaries shared by two countries. What two countries share the longest border without a military defense? What two countries share the longest border without a military defense? Take your guesses in the comments, and while you guys are guessing what two countries share the longest border without a military defense, I am going to dive into some reasons why boundaries are not only important, but they are necessary for us. Boundaries are not only important, but they are necessary for us, okay? So, number one, okay, we've already talked about, many of us have that definition of what's okay and what's not okay, right? Boundaries filter out the things that can cause us harm. Boundaries literally serve to filter out the things that can cause us harm in our personal lives when we set boundaries, right? They filter out the things we don't want, that are not okay with us, that are unacceptable to us, right? So they filter out things that cause us harm. And as Brené Brown reminded us in our quote of the week, most importantly, in my work as a coach, boundaries are the foundation of self-love and self-care, you guys. Boundaries are the foundation of self-love and self-care. Okay, the foundation of those things. So we need to set boundaries as a very first step to loving ourselves and caring for ourselves, right? I see some guesses coming up about those two countries sharing the long border. Dana says, yeah, she's felt guilt sometimes around meal times, right? Yeah. So boundaries help us to overcome those feelings of guilt, right? And improve our relationships so that when those feelings don't exist anymore, communication flows better, right? Our feelings are more positive. Okay. Boundaries teach people how to treat us because we define what we will and won't accept, right? Like Catherine said, what she will and won't accept, right? Boundaries actually teach people how to treat us. Our own boundaries or lack of them teach people how to treat us based on what we do and don't accept or do and don't allow, right? Number 3. Boundaries create clear understandings and expectations. So proactively set boundaries, create understandings between people. They set expectations, right? They can set expectations around behavior or things as, like meal times, right? Things as every day as like meal times, setting those expectations, right? Setting an understanding, right? They create understandings and set expectations. Number 4, and this is directly related to the new year, new goals, resolutions aspect, right? Boundaries allow us to focus and get things done and at the same time protect us from burnout. Boundaries allow us to focus and get things done while protecting us from burnout. Okay? And number 5, and this again is deeply, deeply connected to my work as an integrative life and wellness coach. Boundaries benefit every single one of our 4 pillars of wellness. Boundaries benefit every single one of our 4 pillars of wellness. And for those of you who have been around for a while, you know what the 4 pillars of wellness are. We've talked about them ever since our very first episode, way back when we were doing Mindset Mondays series for Mental Health Awareness Month last May. So our 4 pillars of wellness are mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual wellness. Boundaries benefit all 4 of those. And I'm going to share an example from my own life as soon as I answer the trivia question. And I saw a lot of guesses come up with the trivia question. We have Tina says Canada and US. Trish also says Canada and US. Scott says Switzerland and Italy. Okay. We have another Canada and US. Yeah. So all of you who said Switzerland and Italy, sorry, that is wrong. It is Canada and the United States. Canada and the United States share the longest border without a military defense. So our boundary is not protected with a military, but we set clear expectations for what we expect with that boundary, right? And then that way we don't need that, right? So clear boundaries also work with international relations as well. All right. So healthy boundaries benefit all 4 of our pillars of wellness: mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And I just had a realization about this fairly recently, actually, and it led to a change in my entire morning routine. And so I want to share this because this is about how somebody else doesn't have to do anything for us to realize a boundary is being crossed, right? Sometimes it's just our own behavior that we have to adjust, right? It's not about other people all the time, right? Or other things. It's about our own adjustments that we need to make. And here's a prime example of this from my own life, okay? So a lot of you know, I have this morning routine that I start my days with pretty consistently. I would, read the Washington Post, make my coffee, have this morning time where I, sit down and scan the paper. There are things I would cut out, comics and articles and things like that I've often shared here on episodes of Sparked. And that reading the paper every single day, I've done that for years, you guys, years. And I also believe the universe gives us a little my business coach, yes, because I've hired a coach to work with me as well at times in my life. So I had a business coach who told me that the universe will toss pebbles at us before it needs to like throw a boulder at us to get us to recognize when something's not working for us. And so this is back around election season, right? When a lot of us were probably feeling some anxiety. And I was reading the newspaper every single day, and it contributed to some anxiety that would carry through my days, right? The news, things that were happening in our country, around the world, like it would sit with me. And I would spend a lot of my morning reading these articles, and it would carry through my day, and it was affecting my mindset, my mental and emotional well-being. So one day, the newspaper didn't come. And it was unusual. Sometimes the newspaper would be late, right? If there's like a weather incident or something like that. But the newspaper, wasn't there one morning. And so, I was like, oh, what am I going to do with my morning? And so I decided to read a magazine because I also subscribe to hard copy magazines. I'm 1,000 years old. I like books, you can see behind me. I like hard copy books. I like hard copy magazines. I liked my hard copy newspaper, right? So, but I would always like save my magazines until the very end. Sometimes I wouldn't even read them all month as they're coming in, and then there'd be a stack of magazines that, went unread as new ones are already coming in for the next month. So that morning, newspaper didn't arrive. I went upstairs, grabbed a magazine, which happened to be an issue of Oprah. And I sat and I leisurely turned the pages of the magazine. I drank my coffee. I had a fur baby with me. Scott was, doing his thing at the kitchen table, and it was like a very different kind of day, and it didn't take as long. And I said, let's go for a walk too. Let's go for a walk. And so went for a walk, and, interestingly saw a newspaper at our neighbor's house, and I wasn't sure if they were subscribers or not. And so, did this back and forth about, is this our newspaper? Is it their newspaper? Realized it was their newspaper, and our newspaper didn't come at all that day. And that was one time when I didn't report a missing or delayed paper, just let it go. And it occurred to me throughout the day that by not letting in all of that, news of the world, right, at first thing in the morning, but reading Oprah instead, my mindset was a little different that day. It was easier to stay focused. It was easier to do the work that I had to do because I wasn't so focused on all the bad things. And, I got my news intake in another way that day, but I decided when my subscription to the Washington Post expired, I wasn't going to renew it. Scott and I talked about it. We decided not to renew the paper because it actually seemed like it was healthier for me to do a different kind of morning routine, and I could get my news in a different way. And so we didn't renew the subscription to the Washington Post. And that was about a boundary of what I was taking in my own mental and emotional space that was kind of clouding my thoughts and clouding my day. And I adjusted it with my own actions, right? And so sometimes those things will not even be about other people. They will be about our own behavior or things that we are taking in that we realize aren't serving us anymore. So sometimes we just have to set boundaries around our own routines and change them up a little bit. All right, Christine says tons of magazine subscriptions here too. Yes. Trish says, yeah, the news does have a cause and effect on our mindset. Yeah, it really does. It really does. Yeah, and Georgie and Dana relating to the guilt we feel, right? About, the things that, we sometimes have to set boundaries around, right? There's some guilt there, and I think a lot of us can relate to that. There are also signs like the ones I just described around, feeling like my mindset, my emotions, being triggered by my own morning routine, right? But sometimes it's even like worse than that, right? Sometimes there are some extreme realizations we come to when we realize like, I need some boundaries here. I need some boundaries here. So right now, I want to share with you guys 8 signs that it is time to set and enforce some boundaries. 8 signs that boundaries are long overdue for you, okay? 8 signs. Number 1, I And if you relate to these, just give me some hands. Give me some hands in the comments, or send up some hearts to say like, yeah, this is me. Oh God, you so get me. Like that's me, because I know these because I've probably felt all of them. Okay, all of them, and these are things that I know from my client work and my training as well. So, 8 signs boundaries are long overdue. Number 1, I spend more time reacting to the wants and needs of others than proactively pursuing my own. I spend more time reacting to the wants and needs of others than proactively pursuing my own. Number 1 sign, we need to set some boundaries. Tina says she keeps the newspaper for the comics. I know I do miss the comics. That was my favorite part, right? And then the horoscopes. I liked reading the horoscopes and some of the sections in the weekend. So maybe I'll go back to getting like a weekend paper or something. But yeah, there are some things I do miss. Sign number 2, that some boundaries are desperately needed here. Sign number 2, that boundaries are desperately needed. I am a people pleaser who says yes just to avoid disappointing others. I'm a people pleaser who says yes just to avoid disappointing others. Georgie alluded to this when she talked about, boundaries help us to feel not guilty about not doing things that we don't want to do, right? Yeah. Boundaries help us to, not feel guilty about that, right? Boundaries help us to stop being people pleasers. Okay? So if I'm a people pleaser who says yes, so I don't disappoint others, sounds like you, time to set some boundaries. Number 3, I often feel taken for granted. I give and give and give. I do and do and do. And I just, until my tank is empty, right? And there's nothing to fill me back up at the end of the day, right? I often feel taken for granted. Time to set some boundaries. Kim says, people pleaser. Lisa says, totally people pleaser, right? So many of us can relate to that. Yes, been there. Saying no now. Yeah, boundaries. Number 4, I often feel resentful of how I'm spending my time. So this is like, you have all these things that you want to do, right? You got your day planner and you wrote down your big 3 that day and you planned out your time, and then everybody else started putting demands on you. I want this. I need that. Do this for me. And at the end of the day, you look back and you got nothing done. And now you're resentful. You wanted to get, your yoga in today. You needed to take care of yourself in this way. You were on a deadline for something at work, and now you're going to have to, work late into the night because you were doing things for other people all day, right? Now you're feeling resentful about how you actually spent your time. So time to set some boundaries. Kim says, dang, you get me? Yeah, Kim. I've been there. Yes. Feeling resentful, people pleasing, feeling guilty. Trish says, yeah, IT work is exhausting. There's so much stress. So yeah, this feeling resentful about how we have to spend our time, the interruptions, right, of others, and we don't get our own things done. Okay. Number five, hands. Self-care creates feelings of guilt. When I do finally take time for myself, on my list is I'm just going to spend a half hour doing yoga today, or God, I just need, I need to do something for myself. I need to take some time for, a mani-pedi, just to get out of the house or do whatever, right? When I do that, all I do is sit there and feel guilty about it. I want to take 30 minutes and just read a book for pleasure. I'm sitting here feeling guilty, right? Yeah. Who's been there? Self-care creates feelings of guilt. Time to set some boundaries. Okay, time to set some boundaries. Number 6, I don't speak up when something sounds or feels wrong to me. You just let it go, right? It's like that, ugh, did she really just say that to me? Okay, but I don't know what to say back. I'm just going to pretend like I didn't hear that. Or I'm going to pretend like that guy didn't just touch my shoulder in a weird way, right? I'm just going to we don't speak up when things sound or feel wrong, right? We need to set some boundaries. Number 7, I recognize a glaring imbalance in the give and take of certain relationships. I recognize a glaring imbalance in the give and take in certain relationships. And I am by no means saying we all have to become Susie's scorekeeper and well, I emailed you last, so now it's your turn, and I'm not going to speak to you until you get back to me. No, okay? It's not 50-50. It's not a tit for tat. We're not Susie's scorekeeper, right? But if it's 80-20 and you're it's always me, it's always me, it's always me, and I'm getting nothing back. I'm just I feel emotionally drained by this person, right? And there's so much give. It's only take. Time to set some boundaries, right? Time to set some boundaries there. And last but not least, and this is the most glaring one, you guys, this is the most glaring one. This is the neon flashing sign, okay? The neon flashing sign that we need to start setting some boundaries. That my health and well-being are compromised. My health and well-being are compromised because I'm doing too much, because I'm not taking care of myself, because I'm constantly going and doing for others, and there's nothing filling my tank back up. I'm not doing any self-care, not taking care of myself at all. And now I'm sick, I'm stressed, high blood pressure, anxiety, right? My own health and well-being are compromised. Flashing neon sign. It is time to set some boundaries. Okay? So many of us raised our hands and said, yeah, that's me. I've been there. That's me. Oh, yeah, you're getting me right now. So many of us can relate to one, if not more than one, if not all of those on some level, right? And so, okay, so that's great. We now know why boundaries are important and necessary. We know, dang, it is time to start setting some boundaries because I feel resentful. I feel guilty. I feel taken for granted. I'm stressed all the time. I need to set some boundaries. Great. How do I do that? I don't even know where to start, right? Okay. So there are multiple ways that we can set our boundaries, right? We can set boundaries around our physical spaces, right? Like literal or virtual do not disturb sign, right? Closed doors, things like that. These are our physical spaces that we are saying, this is my space right now. I need this physical space, okay? We can also set boundaries around our personal belongings, right? Personal belongings did you drank all of my, special smoothie juice again. And this is especially true, right? If we live in a house with roommates or if we're parenting kids who are constantly in each other's stuff, right? So setting some boundaries around personal belongings, right? Personal belongings as well. You used my computer and, didn't recharge the battery and now I have to go somewhere and, my battery is dead, right? Things like that. So boundaries around our personal belongings. We also set boundaries, as we have talked about already, around our mental and emotional spaces, right? Our mental and emotional spaces, what we let in to our thoughts, what we let in to our feelings, all right? If it becomes too much, setting boundaries is one way, right? So that's another way we can set boundaries. We can also set boundaries around our own behavior, right? Which is the example I gave around my morning routine and not reading the newspaper first thing in the morning anymore, starting my day in a more uplifting way. So setting boundaries around our own behavior, right, is one important way. And setting boundaries around our own time. Setting boundaries around our own time. Yes, I can do this, but I only have I have 25 minutes that I can devote to this, but that is it. And then I have to do this other thing, right? Or I am not going to check my work email after 7:00 at night, right? Or I am not working at all on Sundays, right? Boundaries around our own time. So those are all examples of ways, hows, right, that we can set boundaries. Now, setting boundaries takes two forms, forms, okay? 2 forms, you guys. The first and most optimal, right, is proactively setting our boundaries. Proactively setting our boundaries, right? Like, taking COVID out of the picture, right? You meet a new person and, maybe they go in for the hug and you're just like not a hugger and you're like, I'm not actually comfortable as a hugger, but oh gosh, it's so great to meet you. We have the courage, right? We love ourselves. We have the courage, as Brene Brown told us, to love ourselves enough to set that boundary, right? Like, so great to meet you, not a hugger. Sorry, right? Like, we set the boundary proactively, right? As an example, right? A lot of us are working from home through the pandemic. We are on Zoom all day. Our expectations, the lines between home and work are blurred for many of us more than ever, right? And so that setting that boundary, like proactively, yeah, I can't, I'm not going to be able to check my email anymore after 8 o'clock at night or whatever, right? We set a boundary. This is my family time, or this is time with my kids, or this is whatever, right? Proactively setting that boundary. Like, yes, I can be on chat by, 8 in the morning, but I can't do anything after 7 at night, right? Just proactively setting that boundary for ourselves, right? Then there's the responsiveness, the responsive ways that we set boundaries. And this is like the reactionary, right? Like, somebody did something and now we need to say that's not okay, right? So a boundary has been crossed and now we need to set a clear expectation and create an understanding, right? Like, as an example, if a client texts me at home at 10 o'clock at night, right? I'm not a therapist. I'm not a physician on call, right? There is a clear boundary around when it is acceptable to to maybe text with a question and not, right? So client texting at 10 o'clock at night is a boundary that I need to define if someone crosses, as an example, right? So a responsive boundary setting is in response to something that someone has done, and we need to say, this is actually not okay with me. I need to set a boundary here, okay? So 2 ways: proactive, responsive. We can set boundaries in a host of different ways: mental and emotional space, our own behavior, our personal time, our personal belongings, our physical spaces, right? Proactive and responsive. All right, now it is time for the second trivia question of the night. Second trivia question of the night is also about boundaries in some way. And in the United States, we also like to set boundaries around how we tell time based on where we live. Okay, we have time zone boundaries in the United States, time zone boundaries. And this question is about time zones. So, how many U.S. states do not observe daylight savings time? Actually, daylight saving time. Technically, there is no S on the end of it. How many United States states do not observe daylight saving time? And that's the one where in the spring you you spring forward actually and lose an hour's sleep and everybody hates it and you're just like groggy for a week, right? That's the one everybody hates. It's standard time that is just normal. Daylight saving time is a created thing that didn't always used to be, right? And so now it's a thing that we do because the government said we're going to do it. But there are 2 states in the United States that don't. Which are they? Which are they? Yes, I saw somebody say Hawaii, Arizona, and I was like, oh yeah, the question's already been answered. Sorry about that. I just answered the question. Yeah, there are 2 states. Sorry, I totally flubbed that one by starting to read the answers that were coming up. I saw Kim say Hawaii and Arizona, and that's actually correct. It's just those 2. It's just those 2. Kim, yeah, you were right. I saw a couple of 3s. Scott said 2. Kim says Hawaii and Arizona. Yes, she is right. My bad there, you guys. I was like, oh yeah, which two? Those 2, Hawaii and Arizona. Okay, so that was a quick trivia question. That was a quick one. All right. Um, I mentioned at the top of the show that we have a regular recurring weekly segment here called Moment of Joy. And I know you guys love it because this is where we share some good news that brings some smiles and some hearts. And this week's story is it's good news. It's a moment of joy. It is about how people are being supported who are in need during the pandemic. And this is a really, really cool story that I wanted to share. So, as we know, since the coronavirus pandemic started, we've heard, all kinds of innovative ways that like individuals and organizations have like stepped up to help people in need, right? We've heard about people paying off, grocery bills and doing things like that, or organizations that are really stepping up and going above and beyond, right? But in general, government has gotten some pretty low marks, and in most cases, right, deservingly so, for good reason. Misallocation of funds. We all know a beloved small business that has probably closed its doors permanently. I know my husband and I can name quite a few in our area that have closed their doors permanently. Restaurants and other small businesses have closed. At the same time, hunger and food insecurity have climbed astronomically for individuals and families. So this is why our governments have been getting pretty low marks when it comes to helping people during this difficult time. But there is a major city government that has not only managed to save dozens of restaurants and small family farms, but they've also at the same time gotten free, healthy meals to the people who needed them most. While saving restaurants and struggling family farms, they've gotten free meals, healthy meals to the people who need them most. When it received its CARES Act federal funding in April, the city of Phoenix, Arizona, they also are like, not having the daylight saving time. So they do things a little differently in Phoenix, right? In April, the city of Phoenix, they simply could have directed that money directly, to food banks and said, you allocate this the way you see, fit. Instead, they partnered with a nonprofit group called Local First Arizona to take a more holistic approach to meet local needs. And the result was the creation of Feed Phoenix, which has been a success on all fronts, connecting struggling farmers and restaurants and caterers who needed the business with the restaurants and caterers, right? Farms struggling, restaurants need food, people need to be fed. So there's this like three-way connection across the food chain that Feed Phoenix has developed to help people in need. So the nonprofit buys produce directly from the farms. They pay the restaurants to prepare and distribute the food. The meals are distributed at over 30 different locations, including food banks, totally free of charge to those in need. And what's more, it's healthy, fresh, ready-to-eat food, more nutritious than canned and boxed items that you typically find in food banks. How cool is that, you guys? Between July and December 2020, Feed Phoenix provided more than 50,000 meals to individuals and families in need, and they've said it's just the beginning. A lot of state and local governments could learn a thing or two from their approach, okay? We can save businesses, we can feed people in need, and the city of Phoenix is a shining example of how to do that. So let's send up some big hearts for the city of Phoenix and for Local First Arizona and the Feed Phoenix program. You guys, that story warmed my heart because it's a story about people who are getting it right and doing the right thing. All right. Another thing I promised I was going to share was how do healthy boundaries actually benefit our relationships? Like, I know they're important for me, right? I know they're necessary for me, but how is this going to make my relationship with my husband any better, right? How does a healthy boundary actually make our relationships better? Well, it's because they actually prevent those feelings that we talked about earlier, right? Healthy, clear, direct boundaries ward off things like guilt and resentment that fester and then bubble over in our relationships until we feel taken for granted, taken advantage of, right? Resentful, guilty. And then we start acting out against the object of those feelings, right? The person that's taken us for granted for too long. And we haven't said anything. We've just continued to do it. But now all that resentment's building up and suddenly it bubbles over and, it gets ugly, right? Or we keep letting it pile up until, we're sick and, struggling and our health and well-being are at risk. And now we can't be there in our relationships or in our families the same way. We can't even show up for the people who need us because it's taken such a toll on our own well-being because we didn't set those boundaries in the first place. So healthy boundaries actually help to prevent feelings of resentment, guilt, and obligation, and allow us to be more compassionate because everybody knows what to expect, right? When we have those boundaries, we set those expectations, everybody knows, everybody has their physical space, or they know from this time to this time, mom is going to be reading and we need to be doing our homework, right? And nobody gets upset that day. Or, for all of us in multi-person households who work from home. And my husband and I are, we had this all worked out even before the pandemic because we both worked from home anyway. But we have, our own physical spaces, right? I have my office. He has his studio. We have places where we work, where we shut the door. And we have tools that help us to communicate with each other about where we're going to be when, what we're going to be doing when, right? So he doesn't run into my office while I'm on a session with a client and say, oh, hey, can you look at this one thing for me? Or, I don't stroll into his studio while he's in a co-write or, prepping for his show and say, I just need to ask you, this one question, right? So setting those boundaries, right, keeps relationships healthy, keeps communication flowing, and wards off all of those things like resentment, guilt, and feelings of obligation, and allows to be more compassionate, loving people with those around us, right? So boundaries help foster healthy relationships. Healthy boundaries equals healthy relationships. Okay, so what can we do, though, to actually enforce them, right? So we know they're good for us. They know that they're good for our relationship. We've even talked about, there's proactive and reactive, and I can set them around my physical space and all the things. How do we enforce them, right? How do we actually enforce the boundaries, though? So we've set them, but what if they have been crossed, right? Scott says, I'm tempted to bust into your office right now. Just kidding. Yeah. That's okay. You know what, Scott, I think the audience would probably love it, and we would all get a really big laugh if you busted into my office and did a little dance behind me while I'm on my show. I'm just saying. Anyway, so how do we enforce boundaries, right? How do we actually say, if something is crossed, or how do we enforce that boundary? So I have 5 ways that we can actually feel good about enforcing our boundaries. All right. Number 1 is to cultivate an unapologetic mindset. Cultivate an unapologetic mindset. Setting boundaries is healthy. Okay. You are doing nothing wrong. It benefits you and it benefits the other person. So cultivate a not sorry, not sorry, right? Mindset. Unapologetic. I did a women's retreat just over a week ago, and we were listing out, one of the exercises was how to choose our word of the year. That would kind of be our overarching, theme for what we were going to focus on pursuing for the year. And one of the women in the group chose the word unapologetic, and I loved it on so many levels. And so it really relates to creating boundaries, to carving out that time for ourselves, to saying I am not going to be sorry for doing this. I am not going to feel guilty for my self-care. I am not going to be sorry, right? My unapologetic mindset says boundaries are good for everybody involved. And Christine says musical interlude. Yeah. So don't be surprised if you see Scott bust in here at some point during a show. I don't know. Okay. Number 2, how do we enforce our boundaries, right? We speak our truth. We just speak our truth, right? It's one of the reasons why I chose the book Daring Greatly for the month of January. And as we're setting goals and making new resolutions, speaking our truth, saying what we need to succeed and be successful, what we need from those around us, right? Just speaking our truth, and sometimes not being afraid to say, like, this isn't okay with me. So, can we do this moving forward? Or, I can't accept texts at 10 o'clock at night, but if you need something, feel free to email me and I will respond to you during business hours, right? Just setting those expectations, right? And saying, like, this is my truth. This is what I need. This is what I need from you, okay? Number 3, get comfortable saying no. Get comfortable saying no. No can be your new best friend, okay? No can be your new best friend. We all know the, great Shonda Rhimes, and her book, The Year of Yes, was all about saying yes to all of the things that were being offered to her because her default used to be no. There was actually a new New Year's, we all know Hallmark for its countdown to Christmas, it's Christmas movies, right? But there was a New Year's resolution Hallmark movie that my husband and I just watched the other night, and it was all about a woman who decided to say yes to everything. And in many ways, all that does is it sounds like a really expansive, wonderful thing to do, right? I'm just going to accept all the things and say yes. And then we just become more and more burdened by all the things piling up. So no can be your best friend, and just say, no, I can't do that right now. I have to focus on this deadline for my project. No, I am not going to go to happy hour this week with the girls because I have to, prep for my retreat, right? Or no, I can't actually, have movie night this, or whatever it is, right? We say no. We can say no, right? Every now and then, all right? It's okay. It's okay. It's a healthy boundary. Get comfortable saying no. And last, recognize when your boundaries might need to change. Be flexible. Recognize when your boundaries may need to change and be flexible, right? We are not all carved in stone, right? We may recognize, all right, this is what I needed then, but my needs have changed and it's okay if I loosen this boundary, or I actually need to strengthen this boundary right now because I really need to focus. I'm going to talk about a couple of tools here in a second, and I'm putting my phone on do not disturb today, right? Or I'm hanging that do not disturb sign, or I'm closing my door today in the office, and I normally don't, but I really need to focus, so my door's staying closed all day, right? Recognize, okay, when we need to be flexible in the expectations that we've set, all right? And it's okay to shift boundaries when we need to. All right. So our last trivia question of the day, and I'm going to talk about our charity and share some tools for creating boundaries. Our last trivia question of the day. When the United States made the Louisiana Purchase, we're talking history class here, y'all. When the United States made the Louisiana Purchase, it shifted the western boundary of our country from the Mississippi River to what we now know as what national park? The Louisiana Purchase shifted the western boundary of the United States all the way west from what used to be the Mississippi River to now we know as what national park did the Louisiana Purchase shift our western boundary to? All right, national park shifted by the Louisiana Purchase, the western boundary of the United States. Take your guesses in the comments. And while you're doing that, I'm going to talk about this week's charity, you guys. I'm going to talk about this week's charity, and it is one that is near and dear to my heart. This week's charity is Appalachian Feline Friends. And for those of you who have been around for a while or have been friends with me or Scott on Facebook for a while, you know that Appalachian Feline Friends is the animal rescue where we met our dear, sweet Dolly Bean. And they are an animal rescue based in the southwestern corner of Virginia. And they focus mainly on cats, but they've, rescued some dogs because big hearts, right? Big hearts. And right now, they need our help more than ever. And they just put out a call to their donors and their rescue family for an urgent need. And so that is why I have named them my charity beneficiary for this evening. And this is a story I want to share with you guys. The same organization that saved our Dolly Bean's life when she was an orphan kitten is in the process of rescuing and finding permanent homes for a case of 16 cats. 16 cats all at once, and they need everything from their veterinary care, updated shots, all of the things. They need to find foster homes. They need to pay for a ton of medical care for these cats, and without draining the coffers that they need to continue with the rest of their rescue and fostering and permanent home finding work. So Appalachian Feline Friends, you guys, is our charity beneficiary, the amazing charity that saved our Dolly Bean's life when she was just a 3-day-old orphan kitten, gave her a strong start, a good foster home, and allowed us to meet her and bring her home and change our lives and our family forever. And we are going to be supporting them this week with a 10% contribution to support this urgent need of rescue and sustain their ongoing programs as well. So if you're considering a contribution this evening, that is where our 10% will go. Appalachian Feline Friends. All right, I've seen a couple of guesses come up there, all the same guess. Yellowstone, Yellowstone, Yellowstone. Yeah, Kim, Trish, and Scott all said Yellowstone, and you guys are correct. It is Yellowstone National Park is what we now know as that western shift in the boundary. All right, quickly, I want to share just a couple of tools that can help us set some boundaries and enforce them as well. I already mentioned turning on Do Not Disturb on our phones, right? Turning on Do Not Disturb on our phones. And if it's the kind of thing where there's also, technology tools, right? There's the Do Not Disturb, but if we need to keep the line open, if our kids need us for something, or our spouse needs us, or our parent needs us for something, right? You can always set contact settings to be exceptions, right? You can accept for certain contacts. Do not disturb for everybody except, my dad who is dealing with a medical issue, or, my son who is, away at school, or whatever, right? We can accept certain people, but turn on Do Not Disturb for everybody else. That is a big one. There is an exercise I do with all of my clients who struggle with finding time for themselves and time for their own projects. And it is what I call time tracking an ideal week designing. Okay, time tracking an ideal week. And time tracking is where you literally write down everything that you actually do in a day and track that against what you set out to do, but how you're actually spending your time. And ideal week is actually creating blocks of time for how you want to spend the hours in your day. So if I want to take an hour for a morning routine every day, you block that out and say, I'm doing my coffee, I am reading my magazine, and I am going to do yoga and meditation from 7 to 8 o'clock every day, and that is my morning routine, right? We block that out. If we know that, 6 to 7 is, our family wind down time, we block that out on our calendar, right? If I know I need to, dedicate an hour a day to finishing classes or coursework, I'm earning some new certifications this year. I want to do that over my lunch hour, right? So I block that time out on my calendar, right? And the tool that I use, I've talked about this before, but my day designer allows me to do that. And there's an ideal week tool for those of you who use day designer or have considered purchasing one. You can actually block out chunks of time and plan your ideal week in a grid page that is included inside your day designer. And I will share links to all of these resources in the show notes that we'll publish on my website tomorrow. And I will disclose that I am a day designer affiliate and an affiliate for Cozy, the app that I'm about to mention that Scott and I use to track our own schedule. So that way I open Cozy, I know, oh, he's in a co-write today. Not going to run into his office right now and ask him for a thing. I'll wait until 3:30 or whatever, right? So we use an online calendar. And it also does a bunch of other things. We can coordinate grocery lists. We can each contribute to grocery lists. We store online recipes in there. It's a birthday reminder. Cozy is it's a great organizing app that keeps a lot of different things straight for us. And I am proud to have become an affiliate for both of those brands after using them for years, literally. So I do need to disclose that I am an affiliate for Day Designer and Cozy, but it's only because I used them for years and love them so much and decided to pursue those relationships. So Kim says, what does the do not disturb do versus just not answering do? So it actually sends calls directly to a voicemail. It actually doesn't even, so if you have your phone out because, you maybe do need to, if your dad calls or your son calls or whoever, right? If you do have the phone and you are liable to get distracted by, texts that keep popping up or, robocalls or whatever the thing is, right? Do not disturb prevents those things from even like blipping up on our screen. It just sends them directly and quietly somewhere else. Because sometimes I can get distracted even just by the things that keep popping up on my phone, even if I have it on vibrate or silent or whatever, just seeing it light up is like, oh, what is it? What is it? What is it? And we're like tempted all the more to look at it. Do not disturb, just reroutes it and we can check it later. Great question, Kim. Great question. All right. And so those are some tools for setting boundaries that help us track them, because the ideal week thing is important, because if we know how we want to spend our time, we are more likely to actually spend it that way, or at least we have a baseline to compare how we're actually spending our time, right? If we know what we want to do, we have an ideal to work towards, right? Even if it's not perfect from day one, we can work towards it, right? So it's important to at least have an idea in our head how we want to be spending our time. All right, you guys, that is the show for tonight, all about boundaries. Such an important topic. Tina, thank you for sharing the quote that inspired this episode. Thank you all for being here to talk about this topic tonight. Let me know if this has inspired you to set some boundaries in new areas. Run on over to the Sparked Living group, join that, and let's have some conversations about how we're exercising our boundaries this week. I'd love to hear from you all to see how this episode might be making a difference for you in your lives. So thank you so much. Next week, we are going to be back here, same time, same place. It is Martin Luther King Jr. Day next Monday, January 18th. And next week's theme is all about better than we found it. Next week's theme is better than we found it, and we are going to be back here talking about that on MLK Day. So I hope to see you all back here next week, Monday at 7:30 Eastern. In the meantime, be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. Be good to yourselves. Set those boundaries. All right. I love you guys. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.